Okay, so on this problem, this is just meant to be a review of what we did yesterday. And this is one of the harder problems, right? So a lot of the questions I had from Delta Math last night were about writing the equation when you're given the endpoints of the diameter, especially if it doesn't fit on a graph really nicely, right? So if it fits on a graph, it's really easy to plot the points and help you use that to figure out the length of your radius and your center. Okay, so if we do this, let's just remember what the steps are, all right? So, and then on this problem, because it doesn't fit nicely on a graph, I'm going to use the formulas instead of graphing it and counting. So the first thing we're going to do is find the center. Okay, so how am I going to find the center? Yeah, exactly. I'm going to use the midpoint formula. Okay, so if you remember, the midpoint formula is, we write it kind of like this. x1 plus x2 all over 2, and then y1 plus y2 all over 2. And that's one that wasn't in your notes that I told you, you need to know that. You need to write it down, have it in your notes. It looks complicated, but all that I'm doing is I'm finding the average of the x values and the average of the y values. Okay, that's all that it is. So over here, I'm going to do this formula kind of twice. You do it once for your x's, once for your y. So let's find our x's. Okay, so I'm going to say -7 plus a -11 divided by 2. So that gives me -18 divided by 2, which is just -9. So that's going to become the x coordinate of my midpoint. Okay? And now I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it for y. And I'm going to add my y's together. And I get 6. So I'm adding them together, dividing by 2. It's just finding the average. You think of that, hey, I'm just averaging them together and I'll get what's in the middle, right? And then that's going to go here. There's the y coordinate. Okay, so now that's the center of my circle, right? So if my goal is to write this equation in standard form, I already have half of the equation completed. And the next part I need to do is I need to find the radius. So what formula am I going to use to find the radius? The distance formula, exactly. All right, so I'm going to use the distance formula, and I'm going to find the distance between the center and either endpoint of the diameter. It doesn't matter which, because the radius is going to be the same all the way around. All right? Okay, so when I do the distance formula, scroll down a little bit here. Let's write down what that is. The distance formula is the one that looks super complicated, but it's going to be the square root of the difference in the x values squared plus the difference in my y values squared. Okay, it looks complicated, but really all it is, remember, is the Pythagorean theorem. And if you think about, instead of thinking about which points, x1, x2, all that, just think about the difference between the two x values and the difference between the two y values. So on step 2 here, I'm going to use the center, right? And one of the endpoints. So which one should we use? It doesn't really matter. How about -7 and 7? Just because the numbers are smaller. Right? So that's going to give me the radius. So when I do this, instead of using the distance here, let's just call it R, so I don't get it confused with D as in diameter. Here, this D stands for distance, not diameter, but I'm trying to find the length of the radius, and I can call either of these, like this would be 0.1, this would be 0.2, doesn't matter which one is which. So I want to find the difference in my x's. So -7 minus -9. I'm going to square that. Plus the difference in the y values. And I'm going to square that. And then I'm going to take the square root of that to get r. Okay, so if I keep going, the difference between -7 and 9 is just going to be 2 squared. It's going to give me 4. This is just 1 squared. So what is 1 squared? 1. We always, not we, but I don't know why. Occasionally we kind of freak out about that one and forget. So, all right. So the radius is the square root of 5. Okay, so I just use the distance formula to find the length of the radius. So when you're doing this, you just want to make sure you use the center in one of your endpoints. You can find the length of the whole diameter with the 2 points you're given. You just have to remember to divide it by 2 at the end. So I think it's better to use the center, and then one less step I'm going to forget. Okay, so now I have the center and the radius. I'm going to write the equation in standard form using the center, radius squared, right? So I look at all the stuff I have here, a lot of stuff written down, right? So I need to use the center here and then the radius squared. So my final answer then is going to be x. Remember, I have to change the sign to the x value of the center. So x plus 9 squared plus y minus 6 squared equals, I put 5 or square root of 5? 5, r squared, right? And that's it. Okay? That's all we have to do. And so if it asked me a follow-up question for this might be, list the center and the radius. If it did that, then I would list the center like we did before. It's -9, 6, and then the radius would be the square root of 5. And it's okay to have a square root something, like square root of 5. It's okay to have that for your radius. And on the quiz and on the test, if you're asked to enter the radius here, don't put a decimal answer. It needs to be the exact answer. So you would put the square root of 5. Okay? How'd we do? Did we get that one? Do you feel good about it? And if you didn't feel good about it on the homework last night, do you understand how to do it now? Okay, good. All right, so what we're going to do today, this is kind of intense algebra, but you guys can do it. So what we're going to do is complete the square. Go up to these. And we're going to complete the square in order to convert problems like this that are given to you in general form. We're converting from general form back to standard form. And so there's a whole bunch of reasons we want to do that. First of all, we love standard form. It's so much easier to work with. This is kind of messy, right? So once we get standard form, we have the center and we have the radius. And that makes it really easy to graph. Okay? So if you guys are following on your notes on 5.3, this is just problem 1 from your notes on 5.3. Find it? Okay, so the whole point of completing the square, if you remember, you did this in Algebra 1. You had to complete the square was one way you could solve quadratics. If it doesn't factor nicely or you didn't want to use the quadratic formula. The whole purpose of this is to get it, to write it as a perfect square trinomial in factored form. So you're trying to get it in factored form, which for us just means we're putting it into standard form of a circle. Okay, so here we go. There's a bunch of steps. I'm going to try to write down the steps as we go. All right, first step is I'm going to put everything in order. I'm going to put the x's together and the y's together. All right, I'm just reordering this. So I'm going to put my x's, the x squared minus 16x. When I do this, I'm actually going to leave a space right there. I'm going to find a value to put on that blank, and I don't want to squish it up too much that I don't have space. So I need to, when I complete the square, I'm going to be adding a number there. So I want to go ahead and put a blank there. And now I'm going to put my y squareds. And I'm going to put another blank for the y's. Leave that for now. Okay. And remember, the thing about equations is when you add something to one side, what do I have to do to the other side? You have to add it to both sides, right? So while you're at it, I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, I know I'm going to add whatever I put in this red blank, I have to add it to this red blank on the right side. And same with that blue blank. Okay, so if I put kind of a placeholder there, it will help me from forgetting to do that. Okay, so the next step I'm going to do is move the constant to the right side. To the right side of the equation. And obviously I can't just move it, I need to subtract it over, right? So I'm going to take this constant and put it over here, which I could have done that all in one step, but I'm just trying to do step by step here. So I have my x squared plus a blank. I have my y plus a blank. And then I'm going to end up with negative 16. And I'm going to get plus something from the x's and plus something from the y's. Okay? All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to complete the square for the x's, and then I'm going to do it again for the y's. All right, so when I do that, I'm going to divide the middle term by 2. All right, so we're going to do x's first. I'm going to take the middle term. I get -8. And I'm going to square it. And then I'm going to add to both sides of the equation. All right, so I'm going to put the 64 here in this blank and over here in that blank. So I'm adding it to both sides of the equation. And that's probably one of the biggest things people forget to do. They add it to the left side and they forget to put it on the right side. So if you put the blanks there before you start, a lot less likely for that to happen. Okay. So if I keep going with the x's, the reason I divide that middle term is because that's going to be the component in the factored form that makes this a perfect square trinomial. So I can go ahead and write my equation here. I know it's going to be x squared, and then this number right here, which will be the same sign as whatever I started with in the problem, that number is going to go right here. Oops. Sorry, not x squared there. X minus 8 quantity squared. X minus 8 quantity squared. All right. So again, you want to make sure that the sign that you have in with your middle term that you started with, that's going to match the sign right there. Okay. And then if I go back to my steps over here, I just repeat for the y values. Okay. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to get my middle term for the y value, 8, divided by 2, I get 4. I'm going to square it, I get 16, and I'm going to add it to both sides of the equation. Okay? And then I can go ahead and write it down here. Now this will be the y part of my circle equation. So what should my sign be this time? Plus, right? So I'm going to have y plus, and then this 4 goes right in there. In between the x minus 8 quantity squared and the y plus 4 quantity squared, it will always be plus, right? Every single time for a circle, it has to be plus. And then to get the right side of the equation, I just consolidate my numbers together, right? And this works out nicely because I have a negative 16 plus 16. Those are going to cancel out. So I end up with 64. And that's it. Right? So the last thing we did was on the right side, right. Okay, with the left side, factored form. I don't know why my handwriting is like, it's like delayed for a little bit. In factored form, right? So just remember, sometimes students think, oh gosh, now I have to go back and factor the trinomial. You don't have to factor it because we're forcing it to become a perfect square. That's the whole reason that we're taking this middle term and dividing it by 2. As soon as I do middle term divide by 2, I know it has to go right here into that factored form. Just like up here, 8 divided by 2, it has to go right there. Okay? So this is my answer. This is my equation in standard form. I completed the square, all set. And so the next follow-up question would be, well, what's the center and what's the radius? So what's the center? Positive 8, negative 4, and the radius is going to be the square root of 64, which is 8. Okay. So, all right, so if we just look at the steps, if you follow those steps every time, we look at what we did, it's a long process, gets a little faster with more practice. But the first thing we did was we put all the X values together, all the Y values together, and then we moved the constant 16, we moved that to the other side, subtracted 16 and put it on the right side. And then you're leaving that space there because we're going to divide that middle term by 2, and that becomes the value. Like when you do this in Algebra 1, they would say, what value of C makes this a perfect square trinomial? I don't know if you remember those problems or not, but anyway, this is your C term, 64 is your C term for your X squared trinomial. And so this in factored form is just the middle term divided by 2. And then I did the same thing again for the Y values, and I just can't forget to add it to both sides. Right? Not too bad. Should we do another one? Let's do one more. All right. Okay, let's do this one. I'll do it a little faster. I'm not going to write down the steps this time. So let's see. What do I do first? You guys tell me. What do I do first? Yeah, put it in order. So I'm going to put the X's together. And I'm going to put a space or a box. And then I'm going to do the Y values. Oops, I meant to make it a different color. Y values. Of course, you don't have to do it in color-coded anything. But... And then I'm going to go ahead and in one step, I'm going to go ahead and put the 55 on the other side. So subtract that. And just so I don't forget, I'm going to go ahead and put a space for the X term and the Y term. Okay? So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to take my middle term, divide it in half. I get negative 2. And I'm going to square that and put it in that blank. But if it helps, before you do that, if you want to go ahead and write it in factored form, this is what goes right here, right? I'm done with that part. But then for the equation up here, I still need to square that. That has to go there, and then I have to add it way over here. And remember that third term is always going to be positive. You're always adding something to your equation because whatever the number is, like in this case, negative 2, I'm squaring it. So it has to be positive. Okay, then I'm going to go back and do my Y. I have negative 16 divided by 2. I get negative 8. I could go ahead and write that part. And then I need to remember to square it. I'm going to put that back here and over here. And then always plus in between the two, right? And so what's the last thing I have to do? Just add those 3 numbers up. Right? Oops, sorry. If I add that up, negative 55 plus 4 plus 64, you get 13. That's it. So a lot faster that time, right? So, but the steps are exactly the same. I maybe consolidated a few steps and made it a little faster. But so from here, the follow-up question would be, okay, well, what's the center? What would I get? 2 and 8. And what's the radius? Careful. Square root of 13, right? All right. And on a test or a quiz, that's exactly how you're going to leave it. Square root of 13. Don't put it in your calculator and have it come out as a decimal answer or anything. And it's okay to get weird radicals for your radius. That's okay. I can't simplify square root of 13, so that's it. So that's that part of the answer, and that would be the equation. And then let me just show you one other thing. Let's see. Okay, if you look at number 7 on your notes, see that one is written in like a funky order, right? It has to be square root of 13. 13, I'm answering a chat question. 13 is r squared. So you have to, for the radius, you have to put square root of 13, if that were the question. Okay? So for a problem like number 7, you just want to get everything on the left side of your equal sign and then start from where we did before. Okay, so don't let that confuse you. You just have to kind of get it in order all at once. Okay, so I would write it like this, and then I'd go from there. Okay. Okay, so these problems, they take a little bit of time, right? And they definitely take practice. This is something that's really hard to just pick up during quiz day and follow your notes and get it right the first time, okay? So on the notes that you guys have on 5.3, there are a whole bunch more problems on here that you can work, and all the answers are on CTLS in the same file. Just pull up 5.3 notes electronically. You guys probably already did on Zoom, but you guys who are here, and all the answers to every problem on here is there. So it'd be a great way to kind of make yourself a little practice quiz and test it yourself, see how it goes. All right. So do you understand what we're doing? Does it make sense? And you understand why we're doing that? Okay, good. So what other questions? Any other questions from homework last night, or anybody still confused on this? Anything you want me to work? So yeah, go ahead. Yes. So tonight's homework is on Delta Math. You have 5.3 on Delta Math. All right, if you want more practice, there's more practice on CTLS with the answers on CTLS. Okay, and then tomorrow, actually I'll probably put it out there today, but tomorrow I'll have a kind of a quiz review on Go Formative. And if you want to do that tonight, you can. Otherwise, it'll be tomorrow night. So that'll be due on Thursday before school. And I'll I don't have it quite finished yet because I wanted to go over, review, make sure we've done everything and make sure I have it in the kind of the same format that you'll see on the quiz. So that'll be good. Yeah, Kim.
Will we have any questions when we look at the individual by two?
Ah, yeah, you could have that. So the question was, what happens if the middle term's not divisible by 2, like 7 or something ugly like that, right? Yes. Let me finish this. This will be a classwork, right? Just so you guys know. It's not out there yet. It's not due till Thursday. Yes. And then, you know, our quiz is on Thursday, right? We have school tomorrow, quiz is on Thursday. So let me do one like that. Do you see one on here? Yeah. I don't think on a quiz we would do that to you for completing the square. That's maybe a little bit much. But if you did have a number that was not divisible by 2, like let's say, something like that, all right? It doesn't factor, that's just one quadratic, but you get the idea. So what I would do, I still put my space there and move this guy to the other side. And so this, it becomes -7 divided by 2, it just stays a fraction, right? So this, we go there. And then when I square it, you square the top and the bottom. So I get 49/4, and that would go here. And I have to add it to this side. Right? And then you'd have to get a common denominator over here, which would be so 37/4 would be the side over here. So that's ugly. But it's doable, right? But we won't have that on the quiz or the test. You won't have to complete the square with a fraction. You could have fractions, maybe, I don't know, somewhere else, but not completing the square, okay? All right, what else? Any other questions from Delta Math, or you just want time to work on it? Okay.
We should have an accuracy grade.
Yeah. On which one?
For Delta Math, is it just a completion grade?
On Delta Math, that is a good question. So on Delta Math, your grade is a completion grade as long as you have at least 80% of them are correct. After that, you start getting points deducted. So you can't just go in, not that you would do this, but you can't just go in and hit like 1 for every answer choice and not work the problem, right? So the whole point of Delta Math is if you miss it, it gives you another problem and you can do another one until you get it right. So if you're not getting 100% on your Delta Math and you feel like you're completing it, you need to look and say, well, did you do it on time? Because I'll take it 1 day late for half credit. Because you already have a day built in, right? For the grace periods, you can turn it in 1 day late for 50% credit. And then if you're turning it in on time, are you getting at least at least 80% of them right? If you're getting less than 50% of them right, you will get at best a 50% completion grade. Okay? So the whole point is, like, for tonight's homework's on Delta Math 5-3. So it's not due until tomorrow at midnight. So if you're doing your Delta Math today, you can come and ask questions either today in class or tomorrow in class. So you should get them all right. I'm happy to do as many as you want. Okay, so does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so you guys on Zoom, you're free to go if you don't have questions, or you're free to hang out and ask more questions. If you have them and you still have about 10 minutes, you can get a head start on the homework.